welcome to Luminal. Today we're going to be going over the heinous serial killer Jeffrey Dahmer and his 19 victims. Before I start the video, I would like to apologize for any names I mispronounce. Jeffrey Dahmer was born in West Allis, Wisconsin on May 21, 1960 to Joyce Annette and Lionel Herbert Dahmer. Shortly after the Dahmer family moved to Akron, Ohio, it became more apparent that Jeff was deeply shy, withdrawn, and uncommunicative, showing little interest in any hobbies or social interactions. Jeff would also pick up any carcasses he would find within the neighborhood or in the woods near his house and then take them home to dissect. At some point, young Jeff placed a dog's head through a wooden stake. Jeffrey Dahmer was attending Revere High School from September 1975 to June 1978. During his junior year, his parents ended up getting a divorce and Jeff began his drinking problem, becoming an alcoholic by the time of his high school graduation. June of 1978, 18-year-old Jeff committed his first murder. His father was away on a business trip and his mother had already moved out due to the divorce. Jeff picked up a 19-year-old hitchhiker named Stephen Hicks and offered him beer back at his house. When Stephen tried to leave, Jeff bludgeoned him to death with a 10-pound dumbbell, striking the back of his head and then strangling him. After letting the corpse decay underneath the house for a few days, he finally smashed the bones into pieces and scattered them around the woods. Jeff was forced to enlist in the army by his father once he failed out of the Ohio State University. After being stationed in Germany for 2 years, he was discharged due to several alcohol incidents, his unwillingness to control his alcohol intake, as well as being disrespectful towards his superior officers. After finally going back home, he continued to drink heavily and he was later arrested in 1981 for drunk and disorderly conduct. In 1982, Jeff moved in with his grandmother in West Allis, Wisconsin. It was during this time that his behavior grew increasingly strange. He was arrested twice for indecent exposure, that same year and in 1986, where he was caught masturbating in front of 2 boys. On September of 1987, Jeff picked up 26-year-old Stephen Tuomi at a bar named Club 219. After chatting for a few hours, they went to a hotel where Jeff claims he can't remember what happened once they got there, only that they drank a lot. When Jeff woke up, Stephen was already dead. His body showed signs of getting beat up very badly and then getting strangled. Having to act quickly, Jeff went out and bought a large suitcase, where he stuffed Stephen's body inside and caught a taxi back to his grandmother's house. Once Jeff arrived, he cut up Stephen's body, placed the pieces into garbage bags, and put it out by the curb with the trash. Jeffrey's method of luring, murdering, and disposing of his victims was usually the same. He invited the men to his apartment to watch or create sexually explicit videos or to pose for photos in exchange for money. He would crush up his prescribed sedatives in a drink and then serve it to his victims. Once drugged, Jeff strangled them with his bare hands or with a leather strap, and before cleaning up any mess, Jeff would enjoy photographing the entire experience so that he could remember every single murder. He would get sexually aroused by the radiating heat that the freshly killed body would give off. He would open the corpse from the sternum to the pubic area, remove the internal organs, strip the flesh from the skeleton starting from the calves moving upwards, and then remove the head to boil the skin off. He would sometimes store the skull along with other body parts in the fridge for later consumption. He would then dispose the rest of the body, experimenting with various chemicals and acids that would reduce the flesh and bone to a black sludge-like substance, which he would pour down a drain or the toilet. On the 16th of January 1988, Jeff approached James Dockstader, a young 14-year-old prostitute, and offered him money in exchange to make a sexual video. James agreed, so Jeff took him home to his basement room. After James passed out due to the drug beverage he received, Jeff strangled him and then stripped his body of all the flesh and smashed the bones up with a sledgehammer. Afterwards, he simply scattered James' bone fragments outside. On the 24th of March 1988, Jeff met 25-year-old Richard Guerrero at a bar called The Phoenix. Richard accepted Jeff's proposal of getting paid in exchange for making a sexual video with him. Once they arrived at Jeff's basement room, they had consensual oral sex. Shortly afterwards, Jeff proceeded to drug Richard. After Richard passed out, he was strangled, dismembered, and disposed of. In the summer of 1988, Jeff's grandmother asked him to move out because she was fed up with the late nights, his strange behavior, and the foul smells rising from the basement. Only one day after moving into his new apartment in the Oxford building, Jeff was arrested for drugging and sexually fondling 13-year-old Keeson Synthesiphone. Jeff offered Keeson $50 to pose for nude pictures at his apartment. Once there, Jeff drugged and molested him. However, Keeson managed to escape. He reported the incident to the police, and Jeff was charged with sexual assault and enticing a child for immoral purposes, for which he was sentenced to 5 years probation and 1 year in a work release camp. Afterwards, Jeff was required to become a registered sex offender. On the 25th of March, 1989, Jeff met 26-year-old Anthony Sears at a bar called Le Cage. Jeff took him back to his grandmother's house because he assumed the police were watching his apartment due to the Keeson incident. Once there, they had sexual intercourse, and afterwards, Jeff made Anthony a sedated drink. After the drink's effects kicked in, Jeff murdered and decapitated Anthony. He removed the skin from the skull and later painted it gray so that in case of discovery, the skull would look like a plastic model used by medical students. On the 29th of May 1990, Jeff met 32-year-old Raymond Smith at Club 219. Jeff asked Ray back to his place to pose for some photos, to which Ray accepted. Once Ray passed out after his drink, Jeff strangled, then stripped his body and performed necrophilia. This was the first corpse that Jeff admitted to having sexual intercourse with. Once he was done with Ray, he dismembered the body and threw it out with the trash, all except for the skull. He kept that and painted it to preserve it. On the 14th of June 1990, Jeff met 36-year-old Eddie Smith. Eddie accepted Jeff's advances and agreed to go back to the apartment where they had oral sex. Soon after, Jeff strangled Eddie, dismembered his body, and then threw the remains out. On the 3rd of September 1990, Jeff met 22-year-old Ernest Miller. They went to Jeff's apartment, had intercourse, and then Jeff drugged him. In Ernest's case, Jeff decided to slice his throat open instead of strangling like he normally did. He then sliced off his biceps and placed them in the freezer. Upon taking all the flesh from the bone, Jeff decided to keep the entire skeleton. It was around this time that Jeff's neighbors started to complain about the decaying smell coming from his apartment. Jeff explained to his landlord that his fridge was broken and he would get it fixed as soon as possible. September of 1990, Jeff met 23-year-old David Thomas. Jeff and Thomas were having a nice time drinking in Jeff's apartment when Thomas received one of Jeff's special drinks. According to Jeff, he didn't want to kill Thomas, but he was worried he might be upset when he woke up knowing he'd been drugged. So Jeff decided the best thing to do was to kill him anyways. This time he filmed the whole dismemberment. He also took photos of David's severed head in various positions in the apartment. Those photos were later used for identification purposes. On the 18th of February 1991, Jeff met 19-year-old Curtis Strotter. Curtis wanted to be a model, so when Jeff offered a photo shoot, he gladly agreed. Curtis was strangled while giving Jeff oral sex. Jeff proceeded to keep the skull and decided to paint it to help preserve it. He also decided to store Curtis' hands and genitals in the fridge. On the 7th of April 1991, Jeff met 19-year-old Errol Lindsay at a local bus stop. Errol was paid by Jeff to come back to the apartment. Once there, Jeff offered Errol a drink, and soon after, Jeff was performing oral sex on Errol's corpse. Jeff decided to keep the skull, which later helped identify Errol through dental records. At this point, Jeff was murdering approximately one person each week. He got the idea that he can zombify his victims, make them into completely submissive, eternally youthful sexual partners. Jeff attempted to do so by drilling holes into their skulls and injecting hydrochloric acid or boiling water into the frontal lobe area of their brains with a large syringe, usually while the victim was still alive. On the 24th of May 1991, Jeff met 31-year-old Tony Hughes at Club 219 when Tony was visiting family. Tony had both hearing and speaking deficiencies, so Jeff wrote his offer on paper and handed it to Tony. $50 to pose for some photos and watch some videos. Once they went back to the apartment, Jeff drugged and strangled Tony. Afterwards, Jeff left Tony's corpse laying around his bedroom for a few days before dismembering it. After Jeff was captured, Tony was identified using his dental records. Thank you for watching today's video. Please like, share, subscribe, and comment. If you would like to be informed on the remaining Jeffrey Dahmer's victims, click on video part 2. Until next time.